Welcome, and thank you for joining the 8th in our series of higher education dialogues. This week, we're focusing on the challenges faced by academic staff and how they've been supported by their institutions during this pandemic crisis. This session will be recorded and will be available later. And in case you have missed any of the other sessions that have taken place, they're also available to watch and to share with your colleagues. You will automatically be emailed and invited to the next sessions that are coming up. The Higher Education Dialogue series was formed in response to the common challenges facing universities across this wider Europe region. By that we tend to refer to Central Asia, Western Balkans, the Ukraine, South Caucasus, Turkey, Israel and Russia. And the purpose was really to establish a shared connection with the UK through this challenging period, but also it has enhanced connectivity and engagement in the region, between the region and the UK, and also globally. So welcome everyone, wherever we may find you today. The event today will include insights from our esteemed panel members, who I'll introduce to you very shortly. We're going to hear about health and well-being of academic staff today, how staff have had to be flexible and adaptable to an unprecedented speed of change and huge demands placed on them. We're going to hear about the challenges faced and the strategies that have been developed through the institutions that are sharing their experience with us today. There'll be case studies and there'll also be hopefully practical takeaways for you. The British Council is therefore delighted to welcome our guests today from Norwich University of the Arts, which is in the east of the United Kingdom, Aston University, which is in the centre of the United Kingdom, University of York, which is in the north, and also Ilia State University, which is in Tbilisi, Georgia. Firstly, from the east of England, we have Professor John Last, who is the Vice Chancellor and CEO of Norwich University of the Arts. John studied at the universities of Sussex and Leeds and has had a career in specialist arts higher education for over 25 years now. He has been CEO at the Norwich University of the Arts since 2009 and is the current chair of the United Kingdom Arts and Design Institution Association, a group representing UK specialist colleges and universities of arts and drama. From Aston University, we have Professor Helen Hickson, who's the Provost and Deputy Vice Chancellor Education. She is the Chief Academic Officer and leads on the implementation and delivery of the university's academic strategy. Helen is a National Teaching Fellow, and her current research interests include intercultural training, employability, competencies, and diversity. We also have with us today Professor Meyer Raghava, who is the head of the Center for Academic Writing at Ilia State University, Georgia. She is a certified English for general and specific purposes teacher, as well as an internationally qualified teacher, trainer, and mentor. She has been teaching English for more than 30 years now, developing and delivering ESP programs in her institution. And finally, but not leastly, if I can say that, we have Professor Tracey Lightfoot, who's the Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor of Teaching, Learning and Students at the University of York. And Tracey is providing strategic leadership for the planning, development and delivery of a portfolio of innovative new teaching initiatives, including alternative credentials, online learning and apprenticeships, as well as oversight of the master's education there. I'm sure you'll join us in welcoming our esteemed guests. Now, we have collected questions in advance from you to discuss with the panel. Now, if you have any more questions, you will see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a question and answer function. So any questions that occur to you during this event, please feel free to write those questions and we will endeavour to answer as many as we can. Can I ask you to keep an eye on the questions that are being asked and to like questions that perhaps you would have liked to ask yourself, or also like questions that you would like to hear the answers to from our guests. We will also be conducting a couple of mini polls during the event, and I request you take part whenever they pop up. The first one asks you, and it will come up in the question and answer shortly, but the first one asks you if, given the chance, you would like to go back to things exactly as they were a year ago, would you? That's the first question that you can start thinking about. We did actually also conduct a pre-event poll, which my colleague and rapporteur for today, Summer, will present. We actually asked you, what was the biggest challenge, concern you or your academic staff have faced since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic? Summer, what did we find out from our audience?
Yes, I'm just sharing my screen with everyone, and I hope everyone can see it now. Yes, Simon, so we asked the question about the biggest challenges or concerns our audience or their academic staff have faced since the start of the pandemic. I think it's not surprising that in the top we have things like having to work much longer hours compared to before, and having to use new technology effectively in dealing with the shift to online delivery. And also, people feel they are not so connected to their students and having to deal with all the challenges of working from home. But I think what's also interesting from this poll is that we had, not a lot of problems with regards to support from people's institutions. So I think that suggests that institutions are doing better, perhaps than expected, in supporting their staff so far in this pandemic. And also, I think there is great effort made to connect with the other colleagues and counterparts. So lots of people, not a lot of people feel isolated from their colleagues. Thanks, Simon.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting, and I think that was a good point to start today's dialogue discussion through. So keep your thoughts coming in, and without any further delay, let us move on to explore the perspectives and insights of our panelists. So first up, Professor John Last. Could you let us know your perspective on how universities have been able to support their academic staff during this time?
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everybody. Can I first of all thank the British Council for the opportunity to have this conversation across the globe, and also to add that I hope I shall learn as much as I may offer, because we are all learning a great deal in real time, and that's one of both the challenges and the difficulties, but it's an exciting one. As Simon said in his introduction, my university is very much a practice-based institution for creative arts subjects, and so we have had to move very quickly from hands-on three-dimensional study, work in sculpture and fashion and disciplines such as that, to a culture where we're doing a lot of our work online. And I think that's been a great cultural challenge. And I would pay tribute not just to my staff, but to all the staff that I've been in dialogue with across the United Kingdom for the way they've embraced these challenges and the way that they have risen very positively to this new culture. It's been a very abrupt shift, however, and I think as we're looking ahead to a new year when things will remain relatively similar, I think the first of my three introductory points is that I noticed in the poll the longer hours that staff were working. And I think something we really must be conscious of is the well-being of staff in this particular period. I think both managers and academic staff are very conscious that everybody has thrown themselves into this challenge to try and support our students. But nonetheless, there will be a legacy for well-being and for supporting people, which I don't think we should neglect or forget. My second point, I think, is about the speed of the change and the fact that it was very much almost adrenaline driven. One day we were working in our university and we were saying hello to each other. The next day we were not able to do that. And much of these changes were driven by adrenaline and by the goodwill and by the way we wanted to respond to support our students at that crucial end of the academic year period. But this is not something which we can sustain nor expect to sustain in the new academic year. And I think for me, some of the big challenges are how we embed and support the culture of blended learning and online learning, and what we can learn from each other, how we can make sure that staff feel fully supported. And also a small point we might come back to, Simon, how we can acknowledge the mixed abilities of our staff, some of whom found this transformation, for whatever reason, relatively straightforward, and others for whom this was a significant challenge, their experience perhaps in working online being relatively limited. And my third point is a positive one, really. I think one should always look at the positives in all these contexts. And I think there's been some rather helpful changes in the sort of the cultural relationship between staff and students. There's a new informality in the relationship because we are literally seeing into each other's lives. As we look across the screens today, we see each other's homes, each other's bookshelves, each other's paintings, and it does give a different perspective. And I think for staff and students, that has possibly changed the relationship and made it possible for each of them to see each other as the human being engaged in the project. And I think we've had, certainly from a very small poll from our university, staff have been encouraged by the way that this has allowed them to have different sorts of conversations. I mean, when the family cat comes into the picture, as it often does, it does change the dynamic. And whilst we may have to be careful in the future about protocols and distance when staff are assessing, I think on balance, this change in emphasis, I think is a positive one we should try and build on in the new academic year. And those would be my three introductory points. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful, John. Thank you very much for that. I agree that that focusing on health and well-being is a key issue for institutions. And I as Summer pointed out, I was pleased to see in our poll that that didn't feature very highly as one of the main challenges, which is great and a testament to the work of institutions to support that. I also very much like, and we'll come back to your point about not the mixed ability of staff, and I think that's something we need to think hard about. And there's not one size fits all, and everybody is different. And that, I thought your third point as well was excellent around a big change is that ability to see a bit more of each other in terms of that sort of slightly more informal, but a little bit more understanding, I think, of each other as well, which fits into that idea quite nicely. Thank you very much. Right, next, could I turn to Professor Helen Hickson and hear your thoughts?
Simon, thank you very much. I join John by thanking the British Council really for connecting me with more people in total than I have been connected to for the last 14 weeks. I want to chart a journey for individuals and for my institution. It all started in the last 3 weeks of term 2, way back in March. And within 48 hours, all staff had to transfer their face-to-face contact sessions into online delivery. And this was done so quickly that we couldn't consider things like consistency or authenticity. It was just a lift and shift. We then had to ensure that there was appropriate assessment to replace the on-campus activities. We had to take account of students' personal circumstances. Were they at home or on campus or overseas? Did they have access to the technology they needed? Were they or their families suffering illness in the pandemic? And also the standards that we needed to be guided by from the Office for Students and the Quality Assurance Agency. I'm not saying that we started from scratch. Our institution has a long history of distance learning delivery, and we've some highly rated Aston online programmes. But things have changed massively in the intervening 12 weeks. We've set up a major project called Aston Students First, Its objective is to provide a framework for cross-institutional delivery of consistently high-quality learning experiences in a flexible way. And the project streams encompass a far more holistic approach than you might expect from the traditional learning experience, from recruitment and marketing, considerations to delivery and assessment, organisational considerations, quality assurance, and a very strong communications plan. So perhaps the university has worked together in a new way. While we've sought to provide an institutional framework for what we've been developing, we've also tried to put individuals, our staff and our students at the heart of everything. And the students, for example, we've done that via our Aston Student Pledge, pledging what we'll plan, pledging that they'll still receive the high quality learning experience, pledging that we will provide plenty of support, and also that we will be open and honest in the communication. And I think that links in very much with what John was saying. The staff offer has been coordinated by our central academic development team. And what they've done is to produce something called ALTO, Active Learning and Teaching Online. And it's a series of open and bespoke staff development sessions for individuals and teams. Through these, we aim to make sure that our curriculum is even more interactive, even at a distance, even more inspiring and well designed than it was before. So I suppose the COVID-19 provides an opportunity for change, an enormous opportunity for change. And as others have said, staff have embraced it, and over 3/4 have signed up for these sessions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Helen. Sorry, I got lost on my computer there. Thank you so much for that. And again, you know, very interesting to and exactly on cue. That was your timer, by the way, you heard in the background. so perfect timing. Thank you. And yes, and I think that stress or focus on yes, sorry, your stress and focus on individualities and both amongst faculty, but also students as well, and realizing that everyone has their own sort of story and their own concerns and so on, and how to address those. Thank you very much for that. Right, next, without further delay, we'll go to Meyer, who's in Tbilisi. Hello, Meyer.
Hello, thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, the British Council, for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I'm honored to share the experience of my university in supporting academic staff to transfer to fully online teaching, what learning and development opportunities we've had so far. I can say that our university academic staff was more ready than not for the challenges of the full online teaching. Before the pandemic, every semester we had a range of training sessions on using electronic platforms. Continuing professional development was also under focus since well about 2015, when 2 dedicated units were created. They were introduced to support academic staff and invited teachers in planning and developing their skills. One was Office of International Relations, which offered a wide range of programs under Erasmus Plus Key Action 1 International Credit Mobility Scheme. And the second was Office of Development, which started running a set of projects within Erasmus Plus capacity building in higher education. All of them, to some extent, catered for continuing professional development needs and wants of our academic staff. However, I should separate 2 projects. One is Project Integrity, which started in 2017, and within this project, about 250 academic staff was trained in using similarity detection software as the instrument for assessment and giving feedback remotely. Project Printel, Change in Classroom, promoting innovative teaching and learning to enhance student learning experience, Within this project, a team of trainers was trained, training modules developed in modern teaching methods and integrating technologies in teaching. And as special center, Teaching Staff Development Center, was established in 2019. So far, 225 academic staff as well as invited teachers have been trained. When the pandemic started and we had to go fully online, all those endeavors turned out to be very useful as we appeared to be ready to face the challenge. Since 2014, when the Center for Academic Writing was established, we have been involved in all the mentioned projects and activities. All teachers delivering the center programs have been using active and blended learning, flipped classroom principles. Continuing professional development along with the teamwork and quality assurance have always been our core principles. All this resulted in the following. When the decision to move all our courses online was officially announced, there was no panic. Most of distance online teaching instruments were familiar. The instruments were more or less adapted to the requirements of distance online teaching. Teachers already had the necessary skills. The only challenge was to move all our classroom practice online. And that was where and when our Moodle administration, we call it just that way, introduced Zoom, followed by a set of training sessions. To stay together as before during the semester, we met in Zoom meetings, communicated via email groups, teachers shared their plans, developed activities, video and audio guides. After the sessions, there was a reflection time. Doing all these kept us together, and I believe helped not only professionally, but to a large extent emotionally and personally. To plan for the future, we have been monitoring online sessions and electronic platforms throughout the semester, collecting feedback from students and the staff to analyze and make decisions for the future courses, staff training, program design and assessment. Attending online webinars, short and extensive online courses, conferences. Office of Development started a new project. So now we are finishing the semester and we'll start planning for the future, keeping in mind the lessons learned and the opportunities that fully online teaching offered. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Meyer. Thank you for that. And great to see how your institution has sort of moved, used its capacity that it had originally and shifted that across to the supporting teachers during this pandemic. Really interesting. Great. Thank you. And last but not least, can we go to Professor Tracey Lightfoot and find get your initial remarks and comments, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And just to echo my colleague's sentiments, it's thanks for the opportunity to take part in this global initiative today and share experiences and learn from each other. So I think without a doubt, moving to being an online university in a matter of weeks was never something we thought we would be faced with, despite already offering a number of online programmes and having 10% of our students studying online from all over the world. And I think to echo the thoughts of sentiments of others, whilst colleagues adapted fantastically to ensuring we had a final term of teaching and learning available, it's undoubtedly preparing for the next academic year which is causing more anxiety, and ensuring we've got a quality offer for both new and existing students in an environment that's rapidly evolving, where government guidelines change on a daily basis. And I think in particular, understanding what does good look like, what does good online look like, is a key message we're hearing from across all groups of staff, and the perception it's just about technology. So what have we done at York? Well, we've had many areas of activity, but there's two that I wanted to focus on. We've established a set of principles and a framework for all programmes to align to. These balance the opportunities for face-to-face and online teaching, plans for assessments, but ensure the values of our degrees are preserved and that health and well-being of staff and students and equality and diversity considerations are prioritised. But within these, there's the flexibility for all academic disciplines to develop their own niche and important diversification to ensure the best quality student experience. We've also established an online learning expert panel, and this draws together students, academic staff and professional services teams to take an institutional approach to both online and campus-based teaching for the forthcoming year. We've selected members of this panel because of their expertise, not just because of their online knowledge, but innovative approaches to teaching, learning and assessment, and their work in creating and enhancement student community building. The panel are highly visible across the university and act as a critical friend to departments to ensure that they receive the guidance and support they need for the next academic year, and act on an individual basis as buddies and mentors to those staff that are finding things most challenging. And going back to my earlier point, they're defining what does good look like. Is this small bite-sized chunks of learning, different activities to demonstrate progress, and ways of effectively engaging students, ensuring resources are accessible to all, and showing how technology is an enabler for good line-on pedagogy, as opposed to being the driver. And we're also delivering a series of resources to enable staff to feel confident in their ability to move to this way of teaching. And I think my final message is we shouldn't lose sight of what we've achieved in such a short period of time. We need to harness the innovation in teaching and learning that has emerged during this crisis. Will we ever be teaching the same again? It's really hard to tell, but we've all learnt new ways of doing things, sharing good practice, working collectively with a common goal to support our students, to enable them to succeed, and balancing the staff and health and well-being. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracey. And lots of really practical points that York have put forward there, and I'm particularly sort of taken with your question. What does good look like? And I think that's something that we really need to focus on, perhaps over the course of the next half an hour or so. And I think a lot of the practical things that you mentioned, I think, is something that I know a lot of our audience are quite keen to get down to, facing similar situations and sort of trying to come up with solutions. And I also agree with the what you said about technology is the enabler, and it shouldn't drive everything that we do. It's just there to help the teaching and learning continue. Great. Thank you so much to our panel for your initial thoughts, and I think that's generated a lot of interest and a lot of questions from our audience. I think that we already have the results of our first poll, which tie in quite nicely to how you finished, Tracey, with you know, if we are to go back to how it was exactly a year ago, would we be happy with that, or have we actually learnt new ways of doing things that we're actually quite excited by? Summer.
Yes, Simon, I just shared the results. I guess it's no surprise that the majority of our audience have chosen to combine the new ways we're working now with how they worked before and move forward in that regard. So I think it's I think this is aligned to also the prediction that the future of education will be more on blended learning, so both distance learning and also the face-to-face activities. This is followed by some colleagues wanting to actually go back to how things were, and a very small percentage who like the way they're working right now.
Great, thanks for that. Although we might think that's quite predictable, but I'm not sure it is, and I think it is interesting that more people want to go back to how it was than how it is now. But I think that we've all sort of acknowledged that the pandemic crisis has forced us into perhaps new ways of working, new ways of seeing things that have pushed on the innovation, and we're seeing the benefits of different things like that. I suppose if we start with some of the questions that have come in, and I think the first one that I would like to talk about is in this it's about learner motivation and engagement. So how can we as faculty, staff members and institutions help to ensure that that our students remain motivated and engaged and want to learn? What are some of the more practical techniques or things that we've learned work well with our students to help keep them motivated and engaged and taking part in the learning? So I'm not sure who would like to take that answer, or anyone. Great. Yes, thank you. Okay, first of all, Tracey, and then we'll come to John after that. Thank you.
I think a couple of things here. I think what's very different about learning in an online environment is not having the lengthy lectures that we often have, and it is breaking up lectures into smaller bite-sized chunks of learning to enable students to engage a little bit more. I think we're all echoing this around the sector at the moment, is that being on endless Zoom calls can be quite tiring, and similar for the students as well in that way. So I think breaking up learning very differently. And I think also introducing small bite-sized chunks of even using quizzes, discussion board activities where students can partake and answer small questions where they might not feel intimidated, but also where you can have questions that give the answers instantly. So you can have those quizzes where students get feedback on progress straight away so they can understand if they're doing things right or wrong. And I think finally, it's about almost setting an etiquette as well, and also about outlining about behaviour online as well, because we're very good at doing this in a classroom setting and about how we expect students to behave, and I think we have to do the same in an online setting as well, because it's the good thing about online in some ways is it allows more student voices to be heard in a very different way than it does in a standard face-to-face classroom. And I think for me that's a good lesson to take out of this, is about how we do use technology to enable students to get their voices a little bit heard more, and to ask the questions they might not always feel comfortable doing in a large lecture theatre of 250 students.
Great, thank you. And I think that is something that has been learned, that sometimes students feel they have more voice at this time rather than they have in the traditional sort of teaching learning environment. John.
Well, yes, I mean, I think Tracey's said very much the things that I would have said. I'd perhaps add, if I may, Simon, that it's also encouraged students who perhaps were less confident in expressing themselves in class the opportunity to express themselves online just by simply literally putting their hand up online. They can engage, and they don't have the challenge of those people who in a group are always going to be the first to answer the question, or always are assumed to be the ones the teacher might turn to in rather bad behaviours. So I think that there's some positives here. I can't remember the phrase that Tracey used, but the word I wrote down here was protocols. I think you used expectations, I think, Tracey. I think it's very important that we also recognise that students may now be asking a question at 2 a.m. at 2 in the morning, or they might be writing Sunday morning. Now, that's both a strength and a weakness. We can't necessarily expect our staff to be answering a question at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, and I wouldn't wish them to. So we have to set up expectations and protocols as we move forward. As I said, I think when we made the transition, every university, certainly in the UK, and obviously Myers as well, we all responded, we'll get this right. But now we've got to respond in a way that gets it right longer term. And I think having protocols and not expecting that because I can send a message straight away, that I will get a message back straight away, but equally understanding that there is a limit to how long the question will sit in the ether, and just setting that as another thing. And the final point, and it sort of reflects back on what Tracey was saying, staff at the moment, certainly if I'm talking about the specialist universities in the UK, which I'm very familiar with, they are very tired. And I think however we start to approach the autumn, we've somehow got to find a way to give them their summer holiday. And of course, ironically, it won't be with the travel they perhaps might have once have hoped for, but it does need to be an opportunity to recharge their batteries. Because if we don't give them a chance to have a break, if we start autumn without that opportunity, I think it's going to be much more difficult to get this new blend of learning maintained for the whole academic year. So I suppose my cautionary note is just how tired staff are and how we as managers have a responsibility to help them somehow take that summer holiday, even if a summer holiday won't be the one they might have hoped for any more than it will be perhaps for us.
Great, thanks, John. And I'm going to ask Helen to perhaps add a comment to that as well.
Yes, I think one of the things we need to remember is that we're probably in many ways on a greater learning curve than our students are, because they're very much more tech savvy, and so making sure, as Tracey said in her part about listening to students, hearing their experiences and not trying to reinvent things that they can actually solve for us. And I think that's been a really big positive about this situation, where that this co-creation of learning, actually students are on the same level. Indeed, they are in many cases more advanced than we are.
Great. Thank you very much for those points, and I do agree. I think to answer that question that had been around motivation and engagement, I think you're entirely right about the opportunities that we need to create for our students and learners to become more engaged. But also, I very much like the point around etiquette and protocols, and making sure that everyone understands the new rules, if you like, because we're all sort of accustomed to the old rules, and there are new rules. So yes, and I think that point about staff motivation as well, and being very sort of cognizant of the fact that staff are feeling quite weary now, and your last point, Helen, around our students being native users. I think there's that acceptance that they're like native users of technology, whilst we're second language sort of users, if we can put it like that. All right, now I think that the second poll is in your question and answer session, question and answer box, and if it's not, it will be there very shortly. And the second poll was about what area would you like more support from your institution? And there are a number of options there. You have to choose the one that you feel will be that you would like more support on. That's the most important one for you. And if we can go on to another question that we've received from our audience, and this question was very much about the fact that actually online learning has been around for a long time, and why is it that sometimes faculty feel that this has been forced on them at the last minute because of the pandemic, and it's not something that they're feeling familiar with already, or perhaps should be more familiar with already, since we've been sort of having online learning for a while. And I'm not sure who would like to take that one on. That sounds like a student who's made that question. But yes, Meyer, if you would like to answer that.
Well, I can say that the point is the usual resistance, like which normally exists when we are used to a particular way of doing things. Like, I had the same experience with my teachers at the center when first several years ago, the flipped classroom approach I wanted to introduce, and the Moodle, like everything to the Moodle, and integrating technology. So there was the resistance, because why doing that? We are very comfortable with what we have been doing. But again, you see, well, time is needed for that, so that they gradually understand the importance of that. Because if they don't feel like comfortable with that, they will not be able to deliver it in the proper way. So unfortunately, the pandemic happened very like abruptly, and we just had to shift without much preparation. I mean, even morally, no much preparation to that. So, time will show, I guess, but we need to get used to that very much. Sorry.
Great, thanks. So I think the answer to that is yes. You know, there might be some initial resistance from staff, but yes, it has been around, and yes, you know, we should be more embracing of it, perhaps, and shouldn't be so surprised. Yes, John, would you like to add a comment to that?
Very briefly, I think we shouldn't forget what's going to be happening in the industries that many of our students are going to be working in. I mean, obviously, it's a very easy example for me to make. I was talking to our Chancellor, Amara Sante, the filmmaker, just this week, and she's describing to me the ways that the film-making industry are changing in order to cope with a post-COVID environment. And our students will have to work in this environment. This will not be something that will change rapidly. So I think that we have the opportunity to say, it's important that we train our students for a world of work which is profoundly changed from the one which we were all preparing quite appropriately for last year. And as we make that change, I think both staff and students will start to understand the need to be more adaptable. I thought Meyer was very elegant in explaining the challenges of staff change. I couldn't have put it better. But I think that we've now got the example of the whole world around us changing. And that I think will be helpful. And it will help students understand that just because we might have done a model of arts education 10 years ago, actually that's probably, even last year, a little outdated, but certainly will be inappropriate for the future. And so there's some opportunities to co-create a lot of this stuff. I think Helen used that phrase earlier on. I rather like it. We can co-create some of this teaching and learning for the way that our industries will be working, the way our young people will be engaging with their world of work, which I think is quite exciting.
Brilliant, great, thank you, and I agree with that. We do have another connected question, I suppose. This question from our audience says, distance teaching can actually be performed by artificial intelligence. So where is the human component when you feel your audience, their needs, and the spirit of the room that helps you to navigate the process in the right direction of human development? So I suppose the question is saying, in terms of supporting our students online, can we somehow create that connection that we have when it's face-to-face, but can we do that through a distance? And I'm not sure who would like to take that one on. Yes, Helen, and then we'll go back to Meyer. Yes.
So I think this is something that, again, has been done for some time. I'll give you a specific example. In order to get accreditation for MBAs, they have to be exactly the same whether they're on campus or they're off campus. And so you need to have both asynchronous and synchronous activity. And I've noticed in the question and answer, there have been people commenting about time zones, for example. For our academics, it's now they're very used to getting up on a Saturday morning and conducting classes and tutorials and group works with people who are operating from Canada through into the Far East and beyond. And that's how we have to, our students have to work when they go out as graduates, as John was saying. So I think it's something that is there in the world of work already and is already there in the curriculum.
Great. Thanks, Helen. And Maya, you also wanted to add a comment there.
Yeah, I would say that there is in teaching. Well, I come from the ELT world, so that's why. Well, there is such a thing as rapport, which cannot be created by an artificial intelligence. It doesn't matter how good it is. And this is the human factor. And so if there is no teacher who is there and who can smile at the student and just convey all this human emotion that is necessary, just understanding their feelings and trying to, like, even very early in the morning, yes, just meeting them with a nice smile, saying that, well, okay, I understand how you feel now, or late in the evening, like, very often we have to, at the master's and PhD level, we have to work with students late in the evening. Well, yeah, but there is the human factor, there is the rapport which can be created. Well, I strongly believe in that only by a real teacher and not the robot.
Brilliant, great. Thank you so much for that. We have another question from our audience, which I think is fascinating, which is, do we still need to have traditional start dates, or should we have a 365-day university? Who would like to take that one on? Yes, Tracey.
So I think this is an interesting one, and I think what we've seen certainly in the UK as we're moving ahead anywhere to next academic year is universities offering slightly staggered start dates anywhere for students coming back in order to accommodate this, and that's obviously multifold. It's one, to allow students to actually reach the UK depending on travel restrictions, and also given the guidelines around social distancing as well at the moment and how many students you can possibly have on campus. I think going forward in York, for some of our programmes, we already offer 6 starts a year, so some of our online programmes, and we're not alone in this, and I think several universities, in particular at postgraduate level, do have multiple start dates, perhaps not quite the 365 ambition in the chat, but I think it's a very different world in thinking about undergraduate degrees in that space as well, and I think in order to do that we would have to see legislative change and changes in frameworks. But I think we will see it, and I think it's more than perhaps just 365 days a year. It's flexible ways of learning as well, and students wanting to learn very differently, perhaps at home for a term, perhaps on campus for a term, and perhaps elsewhere for part of their experience as well. So I think we will start to see changes that come out more widely in the sector about this. Convincing colleagues to work 365 days a year might be a little bit tricky, but I do think, again, this has opened up a different way of working for colleagues as well, and in particular those that have children that might sometimes struggle to work 9 to 5 and balance childcare, but the opportunities afforded by weekend working and those perhaps what we classed as unsociable hours in the past might become the norm as we move forward to allow more people to work within the education sector.
Great, wonderful. I entirely agree with that. I think that we are going to have to be more flexible. Institutions are going to have to be a little bit more flexible, but I think there are certain limits, and as you say, I think legislation is going to be quite important, certainly on undergraduate programs related to this. We did have a question from somebody before this event, and this question was about excuse me for 1 second. So this was about, what is your experience in supporting and implementing staff mobility programs? And Helen, if I can go to you to have a go at that one.
So I've had quite a lot of experience, and the first thing I would say is it's sometimes more difficult to get your staff to be mobile than your students. But it's very important that your staff are mobile, particularly if you live in the UK, and that you want to make sure that you are really embracing a wider Europe, a wider world. What's been incredibly useful for us over the years has been Erasmus+, allowing this has allowed staff to go to partner institutions on themed visits and understand what how their topics talked in other places, and offering a bit of resource and a bit of incentive in terms of study leave or some sort of incentive like that has really helped. And so I'm concerned that we won't be able to send so many people if we haven't got some sort of replacement fund. But it's been life-changing for staff. In fact, also, if you get a member of staff to go on mobility, you are allowing them to come back and touch a lot more people than if you suggest the student does. The staff member can come back and use that in the classroom. And in our experience, they've been very keen to do that with a bit of incentive.
Great, brilliant, thank you. And I can also, I could be classified as a highly mobile person, I suppose, since I've worked in so many countries, and I do feel that having that strength of experience from different contexts and perspectives, I think makes a huge difference, and enables staff also to be a lot more perhaps understanding of their students' position as well. We do have another question that I'll quickly go to from our audience. So this question is, how would you change the workload of teachers in terms of blended teaching, since online modes of teaching will require much more preparation for teachers? And I think this is coming from a teacher who's obviously feeling that they're having to do a lot more preparation for this new mode of working, and wondering what institutions are doing to support that added workload. Who would like to have a go at that one? Yes, Meyer, that would be great. Thank you.
So I will speak from the experience of the Center for Academic Writing. So what we have been doing in that respect and this semester was that we try to share among teachers the several responsibilities. Like, for instance, we have the program, we have the syllabus, and teachers try to contribute with different parts of it. Like, for example, one develops a guide, the other develops the presentation for a particular session, and all these have been shared. We have the special website, our own website, where all the stuff is accumulated. So workload can be reduced if the task of preparation for the program is shared, and this can happen only if there is this team working spirit among the teachers. So if the staff room is like the area where teachers get together and share with each other everything they have done, the reflections or the plans, and this is how it happens in my experience.
Great. Thank you for that, Meyer. And I think that idea of staff also working together and working out, how they can sort of work more efficiently together in this new way of working. I think that's also a very, very interesting idea. We have the second poll results, but I'll come to those in just a minute. Before that, I do have quite an important question that I feel has come, which is really to get a sense of your action plans for supporting your staff for the next academic year, as everything has changed now. And I think this very much fits into this whole area of uncertainty and lack of perhaps clarity, sort of staff feeling a little bit unsure about what the new academic year is going to look like. And so how are you preparing your staff for that? Perhaps, John, if I come to you first for that one, and would anyone else like to follow up?
Thank you, Simon. It's a hugely difficult question. And I think if I was being entirely honest, just from my own university's point of view, we're still juggling a number of things at the moment. We're juggling the assessment of our final year students. We're putting online a graduate showcase to replace the graduation show. And we are still in the process of thinking about how we're going to prepare a staffing support structure. I think the good news is that it's the right question to be asking. But we're also starting to think about the challenges that the way that everybody's working life has changed. Staff will not be travelling in the same way. What will that mean for them? I think we need to understand a little bit more from staff about how they are experiencing the reality of being on screen as we are today. to see, well, what is it we need to do for them. I think already some of the questions that are coming up from our colleagues on the polls are helping me at least. I think that the notion of co-creation, the notion of not every faculty, every course trying to do everything in isolation is hugely important, because there's so much to be doing. And I think that we mustn't also forget that when we all started out, this is a long time ago in my case, I must confess, but I do remember my first year as a teacher, when it seemed to me that every evening I was sitting up till unfeasibly late times preparing material. And I think that's quite an important thing not to forget, because I think we are probably faced with a whole sector who are having to do that rethinking of material, because they can't, I mean, they've got the material, they're not quite as bad perhaps as I was when I started out, but they don't have the way of delivering it in the way that we're now asking them to do. So I think the question is hugely important, and we mustn't be blasé and assume because they're experienced academics and good academics, they can automatically somehow learn this by osmosis. I think there's much to be done, certainly in the UK, by the sector bodies to be starting to pull out sector best practice and sharing and being prepared to help each institution share their learning, so that we can get it done as quickly as possible.
Brilliant. Tracey, would you like to add a few comments to that?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen in the university is actually a change in how we communicate with each other as well. So I think we've seen lots more webinars. We have more senior leaders meetings where we're getting the heads of departments together and heads of professional services. So we've got a much greater dialogue, I think, going on from a top institutional level with the executive board disseminating information. We've also got more weekly digests coming out, and actually the Vice Chancellor had a webinar which had over 1,000 staff join in last week. So I think, rather than trying to force us all in a room to discuss this, we've been doing it again in the same way we're encouraging our students to discuss things in a more creative way. And I think we're sensing a more of a shared purpose with this as well, about how we move forward with that. But I think it is that anxiety about going into the autumn term and how do we do that. And I think from our point of view, every time we just seem to make a decision about what we'll be doing, the government guidance changes again. So for example, this week we're now at a different distancing. So I think that's the challenges that we face as well, that some of what our colleagues are facing are things that are very much out with the university's control. And I think that's a very difficult message to sometimes grasp and also to deal with as well.
Yes, and Helen, would you like to add something about this uncertainty?
Yes, two things. The first is directly on uncertainty. People seem to be wanting uncertainty, and so helping your staff to be able to cope with uncertainty, that things are going to change. And then the second thing is an even more practical thing. We've said already that people are tired. So how are people going to take their holidays? They've got a lot more preparation to do for the new academic term. They're not going to be able to go on the exotic holidays they've been planning. And so what we found is that they've been cancelling their holidays. So trying to make sure that they can take a break, and yet we can meet the deadlines to prepare for the new term has been quite a challenge.
Yes, and very similar with the British Council as well. I'll have to say, we're all trying to stagger our leave and being very aware of the fact that we're all going to have massive workloads as things start to come back to another kind of normal. Yes, I think if we can go to the polls, the answers to the polls. Summer, what have our audience been telling us?
Yes, Simon. So we have asked our audience what more support they would like from their institution. And I think it's very much, aligned with what the panel have been telling us. So they would like to have at the top more structured interaction with their colleagues so that they are able to share best practice and ensure the knowledge transfer is there. And also they would like much clearer policy and expectation with regards to student engagement so that they are able to approach it more effectively. And the next one is better technology. I guess, we are all experiencing some challenges one way or another. So the ones that featured relatively low in the poll is better equipment and more accessible counselling, which suggests that the universities are already doing well in providing equipment and counselling to the staff.
Brilliant, thank you. And that's exactly so seems to be following the kind of ideas that we've been discussing. We're coming to the end of our live event, and before we finish, could we perhaps have some closing remarks from our wonderful guests? And if we could start, we'll go in reverse order. So can we start with Tracey and just a few closing remarks?
I think it's been really fascinating actually to see the chat and the questions that are coming up in this, and I think wherever we are in the world, this is a global challenge that we're all facing, whether it's dealing with the pandemic itself or how we actually then educate our students. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to start to work more collectively across our country boundaries in order to understand and how we might prepare staff and students for the future. So I think I've really welcomed the opportunity here to hear the thoughts of others.
And we've really welcomed having you, Tracey. Thank you. Meyer, would you like to say a comment?
Yes, I think yes. Well, so the pandemic has actually closed physical borders for all of us. But at the same time, virtual borders, like related to communication, collaboration, well, like togetherness, like the world has never been so supportive. And like I was thinking about that, and it is like a global teamwork that we have been experiencing. Like at the very start of the pandemic, well, I started noticing a lot of shared experiences, the ways people do this or that, I mean, in their academic environment. So that's great. That's great. And let's keep to that. So we need to be open to sharing our experiences and to staying together. And big thanks to the British Council for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maya, for that really nice positive closing remark. And Helen.
So I suppose I echo what my colleagues have said, particularly in the UK, we're so used to having to compete. It's been very, very good to be able to collaborate. And of course, the world's big problems aren't going to be solved by competition. They're going to be solved by interdisciplinary collaboration. And again, I'd thank you. I've learnt more today than I've learnt for a long time. Thank you.
A pleasure. And lastly, John.
Well, thank you. And I'd echo my colleagues how valuable I found the conversation and thank the British Council. Two points. I have great empathy with the poll wanting clearer policy. I think sometimes it's quite difficult, as Tracey was saying, to actually have that clarity of policy as the world around us has changed so rapidly. And so I think a lot of it's about government advice and how difficult it is to prepare for that uncertain future. It doesn't negate the point, but it does, I think, explain why it's been so difficult in some cases. And the second thing is just looking at the chat. I think there's something we might want to suggest to our British Council colleagues should be perhaps taken away, which has been the question of how you access equipment. We find it particularly difficult with some of the areas of the east of England, believe it or not, where there's a digital poverty, where some students are not well endowed with equipment and with IT, where they're first generation into study, and where the access they have to equipment is nothing like as much as we might have expected or hoped. Now, I think if looking at some of the questions, that's obviously a particular challenge in some of the countries where people are asking us questions and contributing ideas. So I think the notion of doing blended learning and doing online learning, it does relate directly to how well we can support an IT infrastructure, both in terms of the physical infrastructure, how strong the broadband links are, but also the access to equipment that some of our students have. So it's something just to leave with us for the future. Thank you very much indeed, Simon.
Well done. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. Can I finish off by saying special thanks to all of you, to our panel, for your enthusiastic and insightful contributions. contributions. I'd also like to thank Summer, who's been fielding all your questions and feeding them to me. Also thanks to Nicola and Dania, who have expertly managed the technical aspects of this event behind the scenes. And a big thanks to Camilla, who has coordinated the series and ensured that everything has happened exactly or near enough as it should be. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for your participation, your contributions and your interest, and hope to see you again next week, where we're going to be discussing whether studying abroad is now a thing of the past. Thank you very much. Goodbye.